Welcome to a new Harry's Garage video, and today's car is the Audi Quattro 10 valve, the original ur-quattro that was launched almost 40 years to the day now. March the 4th, 1980, this car, the wraps came off it at the Geneva Motor Show, and the world couldn't believe this car. It really revolutionised road cars and obviously rally cars. The whole sort of landscape changed for a performance car when this car arrived. Hopefully you've already watched. I've got over in this corner, we've got the Audi Sport Quattro, which was the Group B version of the Quattro. This video is all going to be about the original ur-quattro 10 valve versions, car that I know quite well because in 2005 at Evo, I actually took one across to Geneva to celebrate 25 years of Quattro. And I can't believe now we're at 40 years of Quattro. Now, Ferdinand Piëch was involved, the mastermind at VW Porsche, infamous for Porsche 917 and those sort of cars. He looked at Audi. How was Audi going to compete with the straight six cylinders of BMW and its motorsport heritage? And Mercedes also had a straight six and they were durable. What was Audi going to be? He decided it was going to be a technical tour de force. And they'd already introduced the 5-cylinder engine in the Quattro in the Audi 100, and there was a Audi 200 as well that had the turbocharger, but they were front-wheel drive, longitudinal engines, and in 1980 it was a bit of a joke because if it was wet, when the turbo started pumping, all you got was wheel spin. Then the Quattro arrived, and that all changed. And what Ferdinand Piëch had spotted was World Rallying had allowed four-wheel drive in 1979. They'd been working behind the scenes, the engineer, the chassis engineer had spotted the little VW, is it IDIS, that performed particularly well in snow. And rather than trying to make an off-road road car, let's make a rally performance car that had four-wheel traction. That would be a proper weapon for rallying and also performance cars with these turbos, this big dump of torque. So there you go, that's the background. I've dug out an old car magazine here. So this is August 1982. And if you look at, they did this very famous, the good, bad and ugly, and listed cars, but they do saloon cars and they do coupes. But at that time, four-wheel drives, there they are. They were just, a little column here, and there's Mercedes G-Wagon, the Jeep Regane, Daihatsu, that they weren't performance cars, but God, they loved the Audi. And if I turn to the listing for the Audi Quattro, sum up, through its sheer ability and loveliness of its feel and character, the nicest car we've ever driven. That's quite a statement from a very important title, car magazine, Ian Fraser's magazine in 1982. Okay, with that little background, let's go and have a closer look. Now, this car is one of the very first that came to the UK. It went on sale in the UK in March 1981, and this arrived a few months after that. You can tell it's an early car because it has those four headlights at the front. They soon sort of tidied up them and had a single headlight, but I just love the look of this four headlight on this car. And what made Quattro instantly recognisable above a regular Audi 80 was these boxed arches. A designer, Martin Smith, came up with the idea, and I think they're just the best way to do a sort of wing extension. We then saw it obviously on E30, M3 and other cars like that. Integrale was another one. It's just such a neat way of extending the wings out rather than having sort of an eyebrow wing extension. And it was just bizarre that this was a four-wheel drive performance car before we'd even thought about it. We had to wait, was it to 1994 before we actually saw the Porsche Turbo go four-wheel drive. This was so early, Integrale, the four-wheel drive Delta, that was late 80s. This is 1981. There was nothing on the scene like the original Audi Quattro. It arrived, it was £14,500, which puts it almost dead on the money of a Range Rover, same sort of price as a Range Rover. BMW two-wheel drive sort of 6 Series or something like that were about 17,000 or thereabouts. So it was quite well priced. It was expensive, but for what it offered, well, it was quite something. When Audi was planning the car, it was basically a homologation special. And the marketing department thought, we won't sell very many of these. They were worried they wouldn't even hit the 400 required for the homologation. So they suggested 300. Engineers felt differently, and they quietly geared up thinking this is actually going to sell quite a few cars, and they were right. And the orders tumbled in, and they were soon up to sort of 1,500, 2,000 orders after Geneva show. Okay, open the boot, a little slider in the door, and lift the bonnet. Oh. Bonnet's a lot heavier than it is on the Sport Quattro because this is obviously steel. And what it reveals is this. This is the 5-cylinder engine that Audi had come up with. And I think it has all the hallmarks of Ferdinand Ampere because it was the only 5-cylinder engine in production at the time. I think it was the first 5-cylinder, straight 5. And they decided at Audi that they were going to have front-wheel drive on their cars to begin with, Audi 100, etc. But obviously needed 4-wheel drive. And the trouble with that, with having the gearbox there and then having longitudinal, the engine sticks out right the front. If they had a 6-cylinder car, well, the front would be this much out, and you'd also have even more weight sort of the wrong side of the front wheels. Thinking was, well, you have all the weight at the front, they'll get traction and things. If they did a 4-cylinder, they didn't have the refinement. So the compromise was this 5-cylinder unit that came unique to Audi, became quite a selling point because it had the refinement of a 6 and supposedly the economy of a 4-cylinder. Not quite sure if that's true. And then you see here, they added the turbo. Fuel injection in 1980 as well was relatively new. The radiator, because of the length of the engine, had to sit at the side here. But the really clever bit was because it was all in a line, the gearbox was there, doing the rear drive out of the back of the gearbox to the rear wheels was easy-ish if you're an engineer. Most 4-wheel drives up to this point had a sort of transfer gearbox here and then a shaft coming up and then a diff sort of here that then went out, and it was a heavier solution. This was much cleverer. Think of this car like a Porsche 911 but in reverse. So this is like looking at the Porsche 911 engine this end, then a gearbox, and then a shaft going up to the 4-wheel drive. Very clever, very Audi, very Ferdinand Ampere. And obviously, from then on, this was how Audi produced its performance road cars. 4-wheel drive, engine overhanging. It goes right the way forward to RS4, RS6, to the present day. That's what Quattro, that was the magic that Quattro introduced to the motoring world. And then you get a usable interior on the Ur Quattro, proper rear seats in it. I will have a look at this when we're outside, but the velour upholstery, really comfortable. It was lovely on that trip to Geneva. 15-inch wheels on this car, that was what you had in 1980-81. 205 tyres, and then around the back, yeah, you've got a usable boot with a lovely, the sort of clean rubber spoiler, Quattro script. First time we've seen that, always with a lowercase q. Sub-editors of magazines are very pedantic on that one. And there you are, a usable boot. You've got the fuel tank is here, you've got a spare wheel, electric stuff. So a really nice car. Oh, a rear wiper and washer fluid there. So there we go. That's the Quattro. Now let's take it outside and see what magic it can deliver on the road. Well, just like the Sport Quattro, if you're used to Golf GTI of the period, this is the same look. The velour, I love the velour because it's such a soft feel when you set off. It's just a really nice seat covering. Cranks into life. Simple gauge layout, just a boost, fuel tank and speedo and rev counter, all you need. Standard heater slider controls, but I have got electric windows, which I didn't get on my Sport Quattro, and I've got electric mirrors as well. So all mod cons. Right, I'm going to warm up, head out the village, and you'll join me a little bit later on some better roads. Again, when you get in here and it's, you know, you're driving a car from 1981, first thing it strikes you is the amount of glass I can see out. These narrow pillars, the glass is lower, the windscreen is closer, visibility is fantastic in this car, and there is the warble. You can just sense the warble as soon as you put away with a 5-cylinder sound. So distinctive. I mean, it's not really loud like the works cars in sort of going around Kielder Forest or anything, but it's definitely there, the 5-cylinder thrum of that straight 5 engine. Then other things you notice, well, it's one or two rattles. This is quite hard plastic. This is what you used in the day. You hear that glove box. It's like a sort of same sort of plastic they used to make cassette cases out of up here as well. But the seats are sort of comfy and warm and cosseting. The steering, power steering on here, leather covered rim, and just simple slider controls of the heaters, and obviously the diff lock down there. Now this is a really early car, and they became pneumatically controlled. You had a pull out thing that looked like a choke. On this one there are actually little levers down by the handbrake, and then mechanically you pull this, a rod I suppose or a cable goes to each diff at the back and in the centre. Really clever stuff. But yeah, nice feel at the moment. This is such a nice example, as I say, sold to a chap in Scotland really early on in Quattro production, and has done 75,000 miles since new. Just a very livable car. And I remember the first time Quattro really hit me. I'd read about it, and back in early 80s I was actually a grain buyer and used to go around the agricultural shows, and I went to something called the Tame Show, and it was held in September, and it had been raining, and there was a bit of mud around the showground, and it was flat, and there was tractors sort of delivering things. This is before the show opened, and then every now and then you'd see a Series 3 Land Rover or something, a Defender type car, and then this red Quattro came past me in the mud. No way would you drive a normal car there, absolutely no chance. Quattro pootled past in the mud, and it was a shocking moment. Couldn't believe this 140 miles an hour coupe had just driven. I'm in my wellies. Yes, it was flat, and it was owned by quite a successful agricultural machinery dealer in the area, and he had a Quattro. He always had Quattros, and just to see it on mud on this showground, yeah, it was. Cars don't do that. Performance cars with turbos and everything don't do that sort of thing, and it really brought it home how different Quattro was to any other car on the road. Yeah, it does its best work sort of mid-range in the rev. We're just going to squirt it up this hill. I think I'll just change it down to second, and then you can just hear it. So here we are, 30 miles an hour, going past the dealer machine, 3,000 RPM. Sort of gets a bit thrashy over 5.5, but just use that torque and off you go. Lovely tight gearbox on this thing, I have to say. Just a nice level performance. I think the performance is 7 seconds to 60. I think Autocar measured 7.1, wasn't it? I think it's declared. That's the advantage of that overstates almost its acceleration. Because of the four-wheel drive, it will go off the line well, and they were quite short geared again, these cars. But it's about 19-20 seconds to 100, which is the measure I use, what speed it gets to 100. But it's the ease. I was talking to an owner who had one of these in period, and he basically said, you know, when I drove the Quattro, I was probably quicker in the wet than I was in the dry. It was truly astonishing. Its wet weather performance, and so awe-inspiring, because you were always wary theory of the rear-wheel drive BMWs. They did have a habit of stepping out, and you weren't used to it. That was, you know, just one of the things they did, sir. Jaguar the same, but the Quattro, you could put the power down and it was a torque-rich performance as well because of that turbo, so it really felt quite quick. Turbocharging again, in 1981, there was a handful of companies doing it. BMW obviously did the 2002, but that was actually mid-70s, and it was out of production, I think, in 75 or 76. Obviously the 911 Turbo was there. The Renault had that Renault 5 Turbo mid-engine crazy machine. Saab with the 99, and then Lotus in 1980 came with the Esprit Turbo, and that was probably the pick of the bunch if you look back for turbo response, because they still were running carburetors in that short run. So to have turbo written on your car was a sign that, wow, you're in something really new, high tech. And then to have the four-wheel drive and be able to exploit that performance, well, that was what Quattro really offered. Again, I'm going down this road. This is a bumpy road, those taller tyres, regular sort of car. This is such a nice car to cover distances. And that's what made them so popular. The pick, if you're going to drive something on road and you wanted a little bit of traction, and you had a choice of Range Rover or Quattro, well, Quattro sort of won, and it was tempting people out of cars like 911. It had the usability and this sort of cross-country capability, and it was just a really nice car to be. Early cars like this were left-hand drive only. In the UK market, we had to put up with it, and then the dash went digital as well, which was a strange thing to do. Rather than the analog, we got these sort of high-tech digital dash. And the final iteration was, well, they introduced a 20 valve back 1987, and it had torque differential in the centre. You missed out the manual control of the locking diff. What I haven't mentioned is the weight of this car, because I put it on the scales as I normally do. And you think it's a four-seater car, five-cylinder engine, four-wheel drive, and it was 1285 kilos on my scales with a full tank of fuel. Remarkable how they could package, before all the major safety tech came in, how light they could make a car like this. But that's what it feels like from behind the wheel. You do feel the lack of mass, and that 200 horsepower over delivers on performance because of it. Because you know, 200 horsepower doesn't get you anywhere these days, does it really? But when you've only got 1280 kilos plus a fat balding bloke in his 60s sitting in it, well, it's fine, the performance. Again, it's got all that suspension travel of cars in this period, not quite as much as the Sport Quattro, strangely. Spring brakes feel about the same. Brakes are a little mushy. Well, they're very mushy, actually. So, well, summarising this car. Well, one, it's hard to believe it's 40 years on. I could quite happily live with this car on a sort of doing regular journeys. It was that far ahead of its time, I think, when it came out. It introduced a completely different usability to performance cars in all conditions. 12 months of the year, didn't matter what the weather is doing, you take the Quattro. I mean, I can't get over the simplicity of it now, looking back, and the quality of the plastics, etc. But as a drive machine, it's terrific, and the steering's lovely as well. The simplicity of a regular hydraulic rack, narrowish tyres, just very easy. A little bit of understeer as we go around there. But I've got that mid-range boost, that's pumping hard at 2,500 RPM. Really nice through there. 220 pound-foot of torque, is it? 250 Newton meters. Yeah, it's not a huge amount of grip, but easy to play. I don't know. It's lovely revisiting these cars. And as I was explaining the 20 valve, what the 20 valve felt to me, it just feels a little bit more hunkered down than this. But the character of the engine had slightly gone. They fitted a smaller turbo, catalysts had come in by 1990, and although it's quicker response, it didn't have the character of the early 10 valve. If I was going to choose between having a Quattro, if I could have a Quattro tuck away, I'd be very tempted by the 10 valve one rather than a 20 valve, even though the 20 valve is basically on paper a better car. I think the character of the original Quattro is what I would enjoy if I wanted to revisit. It's just, yeah, it stands for so much in Audi's history, and it stood the test of time, and it set Audi as a differentiator but amongst all other brands. So a critical car in its thing. You can understand why the true enthusiasts recognise this car, and they sold 11,500 of them in all, rather than the 400 the marketing department said they were going to sell. Was it 300? So yeah, I hope that's given you a little insight into the Quattro, what made it such a defining car for Audi and also for performance cars around the world. If you have enjoyed this video, well, keep watching, keep subscribing, because there'll be more videos coming along very soon.